Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Call It RevOps, and today we're talking about something that often hits home for RevOps but gets kind of overlooked and lost in the mix, which is RevOps and events. So events, whether in person or virtual, are crucial to any sort of marketing and sales process within an organization. But how can RevOps play that critical role? And the first thing I think we're going to open up with, Raja, is the roles of events in revenue operations. Why do they matter? What types of impact do they have on revenue? I won't get too deep into it. Let's just start from there. Why do events matter for RevOps?
And here's the thing: the reason it's very timely that we're doing this right now, just because it's at the time whenever you're watching, it's different. But at the time we're recording this, it's at the end of January. Everyone just got through the first month of the year, which is the longest month, right? Which is the longest month of the year from a planning perspective. And events really tee up in quarter one, quarter two, right before summer hits. So when we talk about how revenue operations and as a RevOps leader, what do we want to tend to focus on events? What are the events that we're going to do? Because we have to be very strategic in not only knowing what events to do, which could be trade show conferences, webinars and virtual summits, or field events and roadshows, depending on what product or service that you sell. Now, not only do we have to highlight which events that we're going to do, but we also want to make sure we maximize the budget that we have for the event and how do we get the most return out of it. And here's the kicker: I'm not talking about revenue, which is really funny, right? Because everyone talks about revenue, everyone talks about it. Uh, to me, it's kind of like no shit, right? Like when you're spending X amount of dollars on the event that you do year over year, revenue is always going to be in the conversation. But the thing with revenue operations, and especially a leader in revenue operations as a space, you have to know that your goal is going to be revenue, no matter what you do. But now, how do we maximize the purpose or the intent behind the event? How do we, highlight swag items, like which events that just what we talked about, what events we're going to do, like what is our brand speaking, what are we conveying as a message? All of those items are going to play into how people perceive you at the event and how they perceive you as a company, which in turn is going to lead to revenue. We talked about this a lot of times where we don't focus on those things, but those are just as important as the numbers related to what we're generating from the event.
And usually there's different types of things that you're pursuing for different types of events. So I know some of the main ones that at least that we've kind of highlighted are trade shows and conferences, which are a bit separate, webinars and virtual events, and then field events or road shows. Can you kind of speak to maybe where
Yeah.
revenue or brand recognition might tie to each one of those?
For let's take example trade shows and conferences, right? It's the best way for you to expose your brand in probably the most expansive setting that there is. You're going to build relationships, you're going to generate leads, people are going to come to your booth. We're going to talk about swag items a little bit later, but that is the best way at a very broad level to say this is our brand, this is what we're doing. And a lot of companies kind of go into the format of, okay, everything has to be branded, but what is the message that you're trying to send, right? Which is just as important, as your booth design. What is going to gravitate people to your booth? It's not going to be your logo or your mission statement. It's what are you trying to convey to the user as they're walking and they're looking around? What's going to attract their eye? What is the message of your brand? That's what trade show and conferences are generally kind of meant for. Webinars, virtual summits, those are all thought leadership points. Whether you do them live, we've actually kind of stopped all live webinars. We've just moved into the whole recorded format, which was very popular in 2024, just mainly because a lot of people don't have time to actually just sit on a live webinar, unless it's like something like Meta or something. Like it has to be a pretty recognizable brand for someone to sit through live. And then also, just one quick caveat to that is if you've ever attended a live webinar or any kind of live event that there is, more than likely you're multitasking, right? You're kind of zoning in and out, picking up on things that you're trying to focus on. So when you design your virtual event, you want to do that as well. You want to say, okay, what are the key things? What are those key words that people are going to hone in on, right? Like, let's just talk about like data integrity. Oh, someone in there is talking about is attending an event, wanting to know about data integrity and how they can manage their data. And then you talk about, well, revenue loss. You're like, oh, attribution, campaign management. Those are the things when you're doing webinars and virtual events. That's what you want to try to like those little things that bring people back into focus, even if it is for a second. And then for kind of for field events and roadshows, I mean, I think they're high touch engagements, right? They're targeted accounts. You're constantly on the go. They're in different cities.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has typically been that a field event or a road show is just an highly engaged touch for a specific group of people, right? Like it's not going to be you're trying to get everyone to come out across the country to a certain location, but instead you're going out to meet them. In the manufacturing space, we would see this a lot with when I was in house at Hunter Industries, which is a global manufacturer. They would go city to city, invite out their reps, their distributors, and whoever else was in that city to come out, have a good time, and experience and learn more about Hunter. And I think for marketing automation platforms like Marketo, they went on the road and literally took that SaaS solution on the road and presented and sold it to the people who would really find it the most valuable.
Yeah, and they went to like major metropolitan cities, right? Like, and here's the thing: when we talk about target accounts, we're also talking about targeted areas and cities, depending on what industry that you're in. Marketo went back during like the Rockstar Road shows, if anyone remembers those during the Marketo days, or even the inbounds are the major conferences, but HubSpot has their kind of citywide demonstrations of what the product can do. Those are all versions of road shows and events. But once again, they're inviting people. It's very targeted. It's not a we're hosting this conference, you come to us. Hey, we're going to be in your city. Come see what we can do.
So when it comes to events, they are still important to RevOps. And the more important thing is how do you actually prepare for these events with RevOps in mind? So I think there's that pre-planning phase, aligning sales and marketing, and then what does that engagement actually look like? So Raja, maybe we start off with the pre-event planning and the targeting the right audience. So I don't know. Let's kind of speak to that. When we're thinking about these events, we're going there because our audience is there. But what other steps are we taking to make sure that we're hitting the right people that we need to hit?
So when you're pre-planning for any event, whether it's in person or whether it's online, idea is you always want to segment your audience. If you're talking about a webinar or any kind of virtual event, who needs to be there and what is the message you're trying to convey? You cannot batch and blast a webinar anymore in the common sense of like the word, right? Like it's not a they have to be targeted. Everything has to be targeted. Everything has to be personalized. And in revenue operations, when we're focused and we're kind of under the gun, so to speak, of like, hey, how much revenue is something generating? Well, let's look at this from more of a strategic standpoint. Is if you send out a blanket message inviting them to one webinar that's only targeted towards specific audience groups, the return on that is going to be lower, right?
So Roger, just so I can maybe kind of jump in and share a thought here. When it comes to the batch and blast process for webinars, that really makes a lot of sense to me because you might send 1,000 registrants an email, 1,000 people register, the attendance is great, everything is awesome, and no sales come from it. And then it might be, kind of the thought process, okay, webinars aren't effective. But the reality is you've just invited 1,000 people that have nothing to do with this segment or this webinar that you're talking about. How could the same be true for an event that you're attending? If you're attending an event that really doesn't have your ICP, your ideal customer persona, what's the point of even attending potentially? And you might dismiss events altogether, but the reality is you haven't planned and looked for the right people to target or invite to that specific event. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, that's a fair statement. And to kind of go back from what you were saying is if the event doesn't align with your ICP, and you should probably just not go to it because you're going to spend more marketing dollars and more time and effort, and you're not going to return anything from the event. There's plenty of events that we've done where it isn't our target audience. You have to do it once, obviously, right? And then you realize, hey, you know what? This is probably not where we want to be. This is probably not the event that we want to focus on for next year. And once you have that information, it's a lot easier and it's a lot quicker to identify how you're going to market to the individuals that are going to be there. How do you personalize a message? Who should be attending? What intent, data, and signals that we're looking for? If those aren't easy to do to the event that you're going to, whether it's in person and it's not easy to do for a virtual event that you're hosting, then more than likely you probably shouldn't be doing it because the end goal is you're not going to be able to get anything out of it just in general. You shouldn't do it just to do it, right? We talked about budgets being cut.
Yeah, and then even more so too, if you're marketing, right? When you're attending an event, I know in the marketing side, it's very common for us to look at the logos, right? To look at previous attendees from the last year and kind of see, okay, who's attending? Who do we want to talk to while they're there? I'm guessing sales could do the exact same thing, or they often do. And the idea is that we have this unified effort to hit the right people, right? Because sales, who they've identified as a high priority prospect, could be a bit different than how marketing sees it.
Yeah, and this might be a hot take. I think sales actually prepares for events a lot better than marketing does,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they know who's going. They know they've already had the communication. They've already pre-planned. They've invited people. They've booked meetings. They set up dinners, whatever it is. I think the same level of focus for marketing. When it comes to pre-planning of events, about who to target, what accounts we should do, let's look at the sponsor logo. Sometimes one of the people sponsoring the logo might be one of your ideal candidates in one of your target accounts, but we just kind of treat it more as like attendees, like people walking up to a booth, right? So I think sales actually does do, and they have to, right? Because they have, once again, we talked about the difference between marketing and sales. Sales is a hard line in the sand of what they need to generate from events. So I think when sales does all of those pre-planning events, marketing should also be doing pre-planning events, inviting targeted individuals or accounts to specific events. If you're hosting your booth, I don't really receive, I don't know about you, Kanye, but anytime I go to an event, I don't really receive something as simple as like, hey, we're at booth so and so,
yeah,
right? Here's a map, we're going to be right here. I remember those things were super popular back in the day. I mean, I still do a couple of them, just because the conferences and the trade shows are so expansive and they're so huge now. So highlighting your booth is just as important to get foot traffic, also depending on the location you're at.
yeah.
So all of those pre-planning events, like, hey, where's my booth? What's in the way? What's near me? What other booth? Like all of those things from a marketing perspective, and we should be doing.
Yeah.
From a RevOps perspective, we should be confirming that we are planned. Like if sales has their marching orders, marketing has their marching orders, because as a RevOps leader in the space, you're ultimately the person responsible for a successful event. So aligning those teams is knowing, hey, sales, did you book everyone? Do you know who's going to be there? Marketing, did you get everyone there? Did you send as much information out as possible? All of those items are what we use to drive engagement on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, and one of the areas too that is often overlooked is that post-event follow-up that is hyper personalized to the people that you want to reach out to.
And I don't mean the, hey, thank you for showing up to our booth. Hey,
Yeah.
thank you for, good seeing. Like we're not talking about the automated one that you should be setting 3 weeks ago that has the generic message. We're talking about the actual follow up to these type of events, right? Like, hey, pleasure to meet you. A personalized version of what you talked about, what the booth, like, and once again, you don't have to do that across the board. But going back to, who are the target accounts? Who are the people that you wanted to meet? Did they show up at your booth? Did sales invite someone, and now is that person at the booth as well? Let's send them a targeted message, right? We
Yeah.
can be from the sales rep if needed. But those are the type of prioritized follow-ups we're talking about, not the generic, thank you for attending, sorry we missed you,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Because ultimately everyone, they're going to get drowned in those, right? But if they get a specific follow-up from the person they talk to, inviting them to a virtual lunch or something like that, and it's very unique and hyper personalized, that's something that needs to be planned in advance. And that kind of goes into the next
And this
segment
is
of
my favorite one. I'm going to introduce this one. My favorite
go for it,
one,
go for it.
yeah, and my favorite absolute thing at events, in which everyone kind of goes to, trade shows, road shows, whatever it is. If it's an in-person event, people are wanting swag, right? And I'm very biased about swag just in general, because I think it's important, but I don't think a lot of people, spend time or even their dollars in revenue dollars or budget dollars, whatever you want to call them, to make sure that you're buying items that are in relationship to your targeted buyers, right? So if you're a tech company and you're essentially going after an IT person and that's your primary role, I'm pretty sure they don't want a t-shirt or a pen, because everyone has a t-shirt and pen. Like what do IT leaders want, right?
The Stanley, I could give you all the good Hunter would do on their road shows. Mind you, this is their road shows. They would do golf clubs, like a high end set of golf clubs. They would do uh like what not like not a car, but like a buggy. You know what I mean? Like
Like a golf cart?
yeah, but like not, it wasn't a golf, it was called something else. But they would do like stuff like that because their people were like irrigation professionals, all this kind of stuff. So they wanted like toys, you know what I mean? Like golf clubs, all this kind of stuff. So yeah.
So when we talk about that swag, like for example, last year we gave away Stanleys. Stanleys were very popular, right? We could have given away shirts and pens, but everyone does shirts and pens. Everyone does buttons. Everyone does notebooks. Everyone does notepads. Um, is that who is that the right item that is going to attract the person that you want to sell or essentially work with to your booth? And if the answer is no, then you need to reevaluate what your go to market or go to trade show or go to event strategy is for swag. You have to be able to relate it to the buyer, right? At the end of the day, shirts are fine, pens are fine, but there's just so many of them. One of the people that we talked to, they said, "Hey, I look at the Stanley and I drink out of the Stanley cup, and I think of you guys every day." You don't do that with a pen. No one writes a pen or a
Yeah.
notebook. Notebooks are commonly put to the side. I know kind of you have a lot of experience with like doing these over at your previous role as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I took away from in-house roles and also with some of the clients that we consult on, if your audience aligns with a certain thing, give them things or create an opportunity for them to have something that they probably wouldn't buy themselves, right? In previous roles, there was a lot of focus around irrigation professionals, people working in the field, installing landscaping, whatever it might be, and they wanted toys, they wanted golf clubs, they wanted tool sets, they wanted very specific things. Now, if we try to give them a pen or a piece of paper, or even a Stanley, honest, that wouldn't have resonated, right? But if you're at home, working in your office, work from home, and every day you need water and you have a Stanley, you're going to be looking at that Stanley every single day, utilizing it when you maybe didn't buy that Stanley for yourself, right? I think that's kind of the idea, is identifying your audience, aligning something that's going to make sense. And, all swag and all leads aren't created the same, right? A pen might generate the same lead as the Stanley did, but the relationship and the dynamic is much different.
Yeah, and also just know, like, even something is to kind of explain, like coffee cups, right? If someone's gonna, if a person is gonna be at the computer, we drink coffee, or we drink tea, or something like a hot cup. And if you look at the price, like if you actually look at the cost of ordering 1,000 pens or 500 pens or whatever it is, a bunch of shirts, a bunch of notebooks, a bunch of badges, a bunch of stickers, a bunch of pop sockets, you look at all those and you combine the cost of every single one of those little knick-knack events, fidget spinners, whatever it is, right? They probably will equate to 10 to 30 really good items that you could give to very specific people that you would want to have a conversation with them, and use that as a driver for conversation. You could have something that's generic and a giveaway, like bags. Everyone loves bags where people want to
Hmm.
put all their stuff in, and that's not that cost effective. But you have one thing that applies to everyone. People stop by the booth, you give them it, you walk off. But who are the people that you really want to talk to? Give them something that makes sense for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
And also,
that's what we talk about with swags, is that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to how much money that they're really spending on those items, and how less of an impact that it has.
well, and that's, to tie into some of the earlier segment around the different types of events that you can attend. Swag at a trade show, at a large conference, is going to be different than a field event, or a road show. It's going to be different than a virtual event, right? There's different ways and there's different things that are valuable and important for these different types of events. So instead of just having sort of this default standard checklist: pens, notebooks, hats, shirts, we're going to use this for every single event. Think about your audience, the type of event, and then also the audience that you want to hit while you're there. Who do you want to engage with? And I think that also
And
kind of applies.
one other item on swag items, um, please do not, like, if someone's going to utilize something that you're going to give, do not brand the ever living shit out of it. Right? Like, no one wants to walk around with a Lululemon, everywhere bag with a giant logo, apparently knowing that they got it at a trade show. Like no one wants, right? The idea
Yeah,
is
yeah.
not to become a designer brand for a lot of the stuff that you're giving away. The idea is to make a relationship with a person and have them use it from an everyday standpoint. So that doesn't mean like you're the want to be the next Nike or Adidas with a giant logo or whatever it is. Like, you can do the same thing. Like, you can still have a brand and a swag item that doesn't just completely overshadow the money that you spent on a swag item, because you want to you know uh I'm just like, I feel like I'm like attacking them. You know what I mean? Doesn't it, like,
Don't do well.
yeah,
I think ultimately it's kind of like, just don't be tacky, right? If
yeah,
you're doing something, it's because you're trying to build a relationship, and it's a tough relationship to build. It's like what's that term? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right?
Yeah,
You
like
don't want.
don't give them like cards with your face on it and
Yeah,
say, "Hey, like that's not the like that
yeah,
doesn't build a relationship." So if you're gonna do a high end item, and when I say high end item, once again, if you look at costs, like if you actually look at costs for everything that you pay for all the knickknacks that there are, compared to 50 good, really good quality items and a couple that for everyone, you'll realize that the cost isn't really that drastic of a change, right?
yeah,
It's not that big, but just to a kind of point, like don't be tacky, like don't
absolutely.
flash your logo all of it, and logo all over it, and everything like that.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway is that what works, what doesn't work. The ultimate thing is one size does not fit all, right?
And you're right, like one size doesn't fit all in these type of events, right? Like it's not like, once again, we really want to kind of highlight that events and anything that you do has to generate revenue. But the premise behind those is, you have to align with sales and marketing. Like, what is sales role? What is marketing's role? How are we branding ourselves? What is the message we're trying to convey? Do the things that we have as a giveaway talk to the audience that we want in return? All of those are going to change for event, location, and season, right? You're not going to give away jackets in the summer, and you're not going to give away shorts and beach balls in the winter, right? So just know, like, a lot of commonality in events is that we'll buy 5,000 pens and we'll spread that out over the course of like the season or the year. And once again, it's not a one size fits all approach to events. You have to treat events as strategic as you treat any other marketing campaign, right? And I think a lot of things with events is like it's become like so normal to attend events every single week, every single year, that you're like, oh, we'll just do this, we'll do that, let's set up the meetings. Like, no, like events are changing, right? Like people are changing. Everyone has a pen, everyone has t-shirts now. What is it that speaks to the audience that you want? That's the approach that you want. And especially in revenue operations, if you're not doing it, if you're not the one who's saying, let's sit back and let's look at this at like a kind of a 10,000 foot view of like, how do we maximize the events, you're blowing your budget. Like that's ultimately what it boils down into. It's no different than just having a checklist of things, going there and then being like, oh, how come we didn't, why are our events, like why are our opportunities year over year going down? Well, all of that stuff regarding to brand and brand identity and relationship building, and and all of those things play a matter into the long term role as well. It's essentially going to affect your opportunities. It's going to affect your pipeline. It's going to affect your relationship. So just know, like, events are just as crucial as any other campaign that you do. And something as simple as making sure swag items are aligned to the buyer or the prospect that you want, that's going to resonate with them. They're going to use that, look at your brand, and be like, oh yeah, I remember where I got this, or I remember who they are. And eventually it might not be 3 months or 4 months, but it will do something over the long term initiatives.
Well, yeah, Raja, all these things are going to matter at the end. Like the small decisions make a big difference. I think is ultimately kind of what it comes down to. And it's funny when you think about events, or I think about events that I've been to in the past. There are a few booths and swag items and brands that I still resonate with from years ago, simply because of the interaction that I had at the booth. We have another podcast where we talk about revenue forecasting versus foresight. And this is kind of reminding me a little bit of it, because if you were to look back at events that you've done in the past or written it off as a channel without taking these steps, then you were doing poor RevOps with your events. But that's fine. You could adjust that and change that for the future and just see how it impacts it. If we were going to look at three takeaways, I think, as we kind of close this out, one, I think, is events could be powerful revenue drivers when they're planned and executed with RevOps at the front of the mind, with RevOps aligned. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a fair say. And the other thing, uh, poor targeting, weak sales alignment.
Yep.
The other item is poor collaboration with cross-functional teams. Very big word. What that really means is marketing has a goal, sales has a goal. Sales, like we mentioned, does very good at pre-planning. Marketing needs to kind of do a little bit better job of pre-planning so we can collaborate on who's going to be there and how to effectively target them and how to follow up with them more efficiently.
And I think maybe the last takeaway is that data and automation, as well as CRM, play a crucial role in turning event engagement into real revenue. And this could look like a lot of different things, but personalize. Make sure that you're planning. Do the right things at the right time with quality data.
Yeah. And then also, I don't know why this topic is on the top of my head, but just make sure. Like, maybe I'm just sick and tired of seeing pens. I think that's what it ultimately is, right? I'm sick and tired of
Yeah, yeah,
walking through booth after booth and be like, oh look, there's a pen. Oh look, there's a pop. Like, get if you're going to spend this much money at a conference trade show booth, then please just spend a little bit of the budget to
yeah,
get something that's more relatable. And here's the thing: you don't have to give it away. you
yeah.
can you can talk to the person. There, it's going to attract people there, and if they're a good fit and it's someone that you want to follow up with, then be like, yeah, here you go, no problem. If not, yeah, here's a
Yeah.
bag, here's this, here's
If
that.
you're sitting there and saying, "My audience loves to write, we got to do pens,"
Yeah.
then do a remarkable tablet. One of those tablets where you can kind of like write on it. It's the digital tablet, and you could save your notes. Like get Ingenuity, or maybe a very expensive pens, astronaut pens that could write upside down, whatever it might be. But
Yeah.
the I think the main takeaway is a 10-cent pen is not going to make you is not going to have a meaningful impact on your revenue. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for Call It RevOps. We appreciate you tuning in for this episode. Be sure to check out the next episode and previous ones, and have a great rest of your day.